we're going to be talking about revealing Rails magic with enums. So as Becca said, I'm Meg. I'm a Ruby on Rails developer. I have a passion for open source code, especially coding for good. And I'm a big fan of tequila. Uh, Also, if you have any questions about the topics at this presentation, please hit me up in the virtual coffee Slack or at my LinkedIn. You can find the handle right here because this is going to be a crash course today. Also, hi, Mom. So what is an enum? Let's back it up first. Some of you may not know what Ruby or Rails is, and you need to know that. Um, you can read the quote up there that I put. Ruby was created by Yukihiro Matsumoto. He goes by Mats, and it was created in 1995. It's an open source programming language that focuses on simplicity and it reads much like English, so it's incredibly easy to understand. Matt's goal in writing Ruby was to create something that would enrich programmers' experience and make them happy. So that really is something the Ruby community embodies. Rails is a framework written on Ruby and it's very opinionated. It goes by the Rails way, and the Rails philosophy includes two major guiding principles. One is don't repeat yourself. The second is convention over configuration. So the Rails way assumes that there's a best way to do things and encourages that through a set of conventions. If you adopt these conventions, it helps you to write less code and also boosts productivity by a lot. Many of you probably have heard of don't repeat yourself. It's abbreviated to DRY, D-R-Y, and it's a principle that states every piece of knowledge must have a single, unambiguous, authoritative representation within a system. So this way you're not finding, trying to go through the code base and change different places where you have the same thing written over and over again. And then convention over configuration, it's just this embracing the defaults that Rails has set. So you don't have to go through minutia with configuring files. Now onto ActiveRecord. It's treated as a ORM framework in Rails, and Rails is set up as a MVC or model view controller um, system. ActiveRecord is that model layer. So ActiveRecord allows us to represent models in their data, create represent associations between the models and inheritance hierarchies between models. Very importantly, it allows us to validate models before they're persisted or saved into the database and perform database operations in an object-oriented fashion. So ActiveRecord actually allows us to perform these database operations without using SQL. It's sort of like it's a framework for SQL that's tailored to Rails. And ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping. Got all that? Maybe a little. Let's just keep going. All right, now, what's an enum? Let's describe this thing called an enum attribute. An enum's a special attribute that maps to an integer value in a table in a database. So how you do this in Rails is in the terminal, you can write this shortcut, Rails generate migration. This example is adding an enum attribute called location to a meeting class. And then we're saying location and assigning it the type integer. This line will generate this file, and this is a migration file. And you can see here it's adding a column to this meetings table called location and giving it the integer value. But before we do that, we have to actually define this enum in our model. This is different than a regular attribute. So there's two ways to define an enum attribute. The first way is implicitly using an array of symbols. And this is where you sprinkle in that Rails magic. I had a mental image of like throwing confetti at the camera, but that would have been messy to clean up. So using our meeting class example, you put enum, the location attribute, and then using an array, you fill it with the symbols of the possible values, in person, remote, and hybrid. Or the explicit definition is using a hash of key value pairs. Again, we have meeting and location, and then a hash, and we're just assigning integers as the values to these keys. So in person is 0, remote is 1, hybrid is 2. Rails indexes from 0. So the order of the enum attribute values must not change. It messes up the database mapping and it just like can't deal. So here's some examples of when you can use enums. A blog post publication status. These are mutually exclusive values, and you could even assign a default. So with the post class, you'd have an enum status, and it could be a draft, published, or unpublished. And most likely you'd want to default to draft when you first create a post. You wouldn't want to go straight to publish most of the time. Another example are consecutive steps in a workflow, because again, they are mutually exclusive usually and could be ordered. So for a job application class, you have the enum attribute step with values in progress, submitted, in review, and approved. So enums are pretty cool, but they can also be kind of boring because they're just like any other Rails attribute too. You can hard code the value of an enum attribute. So using our earlier example with meeting, in the Rails console for an instance of the meeting class, so we're creating a meeting instance object here. When we call location and we're setting the value to nil, we ask meeting.location.nil, it's returned true because we just set it to nil here. And then we call meeting.location, it returns nil. Here, meeting.location we're setting to 0, and meeting.location we're setting to the string in person, in underscore person. These two lines here are equivalent, and you'll see up here they're mapped to be equivalent. So now when we type meeting.location, it returns in person. But enums also contain magic. They have Boolean and dangerous methods. Boolean methods end with a question mark, and they return either true or false. Dangerous methods end with the bang operator, and they return the modified object. So they change the object in place. Again, our example, and in the Rails console for an instance of the meeting class. So these are instance methods. The normal way for any attribute you would update is meeting.update, and you pass it the attribute and the value that you want to update it to. So we're passing location and to, which again corresponds up here. And I made a typo here. This is a typo. Let's pretend this says 1, okay? Sorry about that, everybody. Location 1, and then meeting.remote. And I will fix this right after, so if you want to download the slides, it'll be fixed. So the two lines will be equivalent if it's location colon 1 and meeting.remote with a bang, because, oh, that highlight is not good, because this updates it in place. So if you call meeting.remote with the question mark, it'll return true, and meeting.location will return remote. So now if you call meeting.hybrid with the question mark, it's going to return false because we know our meeting.location is set to remote currently. But if we type meeting.hybrid with the bang, it's changing the value of the meeting's location from remote to hybrid. So now calling meeting.hybrid with the question mark returns true. So these come automatically with the enum definition, but you can opt not to have that by passing instance methods false after this definition as an option. Prefixes and suffixes. So we have a new example, a car class, and I made some interesting values here for our enums. We have color with road rage red, electric avenue blue, and gas guzzler green, and then fuel option, gas, electric, and hybrid. These can be confusing with color names like this between the vanity options and the fuel options. So I added prefixes and suffixes to help. You'll see here prefix is set to true and suffix is set to powered. So if prefix or suffix is set to true, it's just going to take the actual name of the enum and use that as the prefix or suffix. If there's a string, it's going to take the value of the string and set that as the prefix or suffix. So this is another typo. In the Rails console for an instance of the car class, with using the prefix, we have car.color gas guzzler green. So that's how we're going to set the car color. And then when we're asking car.color with the question mark, it comes back gas guzzler green. Now using the suffix, we're setting car.fuel option to 1, electric, and we're querying car.gas underscore powered. That's coming back false, but car.electric underscore powered is coming back true. So our car is an electric car in the color gas guzzler green. And now on to scopes. So these are class methods, and class methods return a collection of instance objects. If we call meeting dot locations, it will return all the options available for the location enum. For meeting dot in person, this returns all instances of in-person meetings. Meeting dot not in person returns all remote and all hybrid meetings. The same goes for meeting.remote, returns all remote meetings. Meeting.not underscore remote returns all in-person meetings and all hybrid meetings. And then meeting.hybrid returns all hybrid meetings. Meeting.not underscore hybrid returns all in-person meetings and remote meetings. And again, you can disable this by passing scopes false up here as an option to the enum definition. All right, that was definitely a crash course. So, you know how you can go see a magic act and see the magician saw somebody in half and then put them back together again. And you know it's not real, but they took them apart and put them back together again. And you just want to know, how did they do that? That's how I feel sometimes about Rails. How do they do that? So we're gonna find out the magician's secrets behind enums. Where do you start? RTFD. If you don't know, ask somebody. Search the documentation. So that's what I do. I go to the Rails API and type in enum. Okay, get back an example here, but this is pretty much everything that we've gone over so far. I go down, find the enum method. This isn't giving me a whole lot, but there's source here. I want to show the source. Here's something. Source on GitHub. Okay, now we're talking. This links to the code base where everything's defined about how an enum attribute is constructed. So we're going to go through bits and pieces of this. And you can take this and do it with your language of choice. Traverse through the code base. GitHub makes it so easy. They have a file finder. They have this symbols on the right hand side. And then they have searching. You just press the backslash button and it opens this. Take advantage of that. It's how you dig deeper and learn more. So here's the method definition. And here's an example that we're going to use to examine it. We have our enum that takes arguments name, values, and options. And our example is a prescription class with 2 enum attributes, distribution method with values pickup, delivery, shipping, and the prefix distribution, and then enum value status with received, processing, and filled. This is the implicit definition. This is the explicit definition. And notice how I skipped numbers here. I don't know exactly what all statuses are for prescriptions. If there's another one, I might want to put it in between one of these. And you know how you can't change the order? If I put in something like intake in here and assign it 5, I'm not changing the order of any of these. They still have the numbers they were assigned originally. So that's how you can give yourself a little flexibility sometimes. So you'll see here, there's another underscore enum right below that looks almost exactly like this enum definition. Well, this is a private method that's defined later on in the file. So we'll get to that next slide. But for now, the name, this maps to the name of the enum attribute. So definition or distribution method or status. The values maps to the array or hash that's passed in, and options is whatever comes after that, right? Now it's the private method that we're looking at. The private method, all that means is you can't access that method outside of the GitHub file I had just pulled up. So that's kind of a way of encapsulating concerns that Ruby uses. The options here we have default set. So prefix and suffix have nil set as defaults. Scopes and instance methods have true set as defaults. And validate has false. And then this is taking other options in that may be passed. So for the status enum definition, it's just accepting all the defaults that are passed in. But the distribution method, we're overwriting our prefix nil default with the string distribution. That'll come in the next slide. This is where we're setting our prefixes and suffixes. So right here, we're making a value method names array that's empty. And we're going through each of the enums that are defined. And for the prefix, we're saying if a prefix exists, because right now it doesn't, but hey, this one, it does exist. So if it exists, do what's in this line. For if it doesn't, like suffix, we're just going to skip over it and keep going. So prefix does exist. Now here, this is a double equals right here. It's hard to tell because they smushed them together. But you remember how prefix you could either enter true or a string, right? So if it's true, we're going to use the name of the enum attribute. So it's drawing from that. If it's not true, we're using prefix, which is whatever is passed in. This right here, this question mark and colon, that's called a ternary operator, and that's a fancy way of doing an if-else statement, another Rails magic syntactic sugar type thing. And then here with the pound sign or octothorpe and the curly braces, this is how Rails does string interpolation. So here we're setting the prefix to distribution. Now for this one, we're creating pairs, a pairs variable here. And we're taking the values and asking, do the values respond to this method, each pair? Again, we see the ternary operator. Now this method, each pair, this has to do with a hash. Only hashes respond to each pair. So If it does, we're assigning pairs values to each pair. If not, that means it's an array, and we're assigning pairs values to each with index. All that's doing is taking each item from the array and giving it an index starting from 0. So it's taking pickup and assigning it 0, delivery and assigning it 1, shipping and assigning it 2. So it's effectively creating a hash out of it. Now we're going in here and we're taking this enum values is just basically sanitizing what we did here and making it so you can take this value and the okay, the label is the value of the enum values. And here the value is the number. It's a little confusing, stick with me. And they're taking that label and they're saying, okay, take whatever prefix and suffix you just made, slap it together with the label, and then add it into here, value method names. So we're making this distribution pick up and then no suffix, and we're adding it in here. And then calling this method, this define enum methods, which is here. So now we have this, and again, we have the instance methods and the scopes. The default value was true for both of them, but we could pass false if we didn't want them. Here, this is just saying we're defining based on if there's a suffix or prefix and what the value names are. We're defining these special methods in here that the enums can access. So you'll see in these green comments, I'm put in this distribution pickup. This is the definition below it for the query method with the question mark and the bang method. And then for the scopes, the same thing, distribution pickup and not distribution pickup. And it's using this interpolation to do that. It's dynamically defining that. So in the end, is Rails really magical? I still think it is. There's something about it. But all the secrets can be uncovered in the code base. If you want to learn more, my GitHub repo is online with all the sources I used. And I just want to shout out Arvin and Yorn. Thank you so much for helping me put this together.